Good morning, colleagues and members of the media. Welcome and thank you for attending and joining this media briefing by the Minister in the Presidency for Electricity, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, who will be giving the latest update on the implementation of the Energy Action Plan. The Minister is also joined by Mr. Eric Shunmogam from Eskom's Generation Division. I would now like to invite the Minister to commence with the briefing. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tsakani, and to members of the media, and once more thank you for making time to join us every time when we do this update on the Energy Action Plan, because we use you as a conduit to be able to reach out to the rest of the country, to give the country an update in relation to the work that we are doing in eliminating, reducing first the intensity and regularity frequency of load shedding, and ultimately getting rid of load shedding, and also working towards ensuring that we attain energy sovereignty in the country. As previously stated, the Energy Action Plan has got 5 outcomes. The first one really, it's about fixing Eskom, and on fixing Eskom we really mean improving the frequency and reliability of the generating units at Eskom, and of course the issues of associated leadership stability at Eskom. And then there's issues in relation to ensuring that we are able to unlock private sector investments on the generation side, to make it possible for us to have multiple sources of generation, and not to have generation just concentrated on Eskom, which historically has been a monopoly on the generation, transmission and distribution side. So as part of the efforts to de-risk the generation side, we are liberalizing the generation side by removing all the impediments, including the regulatory requirements in relation to the licensing with NERSA for those who are aspiring to generate a new capacity. And of course, the other one is to accelerate the public procurement of renewable energy generation capacity, what we call the bid windows. And I'll say 1 or 2 things about that progress. And then the fourth one is the incentives in relation to rooftop solar solutions by both industry and households, to ensure that households and industry over a period of time, some of them can become net generators of electricity. And of course, what will make that even more attractive is our efforts to ensure that we introduce a wheeling framework. As indicated previously, that wheeling framework is sitting with NERSA, and as part of the NERSA process, they will do public engagement so that we get to canvass public opinion in relation to what the framework stipulates. And then the last one is on undermining the vertical integration of Eskom, ensuring that there's transparency in relation to pricing, costs, so that whatever we do is cost reflective, and of course the tariff dispensation then benefits from that transparency, and you are able to introduce greater levels of efficiency across the three companies. So on the policy issues, I'm happy to announce the following: that the Cabinet has approved the JED-IP implementation plan as presented by Minister Krisi. Remember that what the JED-IP does is to say to the country how we intend to deploy the $12.5 billion that has been made available by the International Partners Group. So this is a group of Western countries that have made a financing facility available to the country, from which the country can draw from in order to meet the issues, the agenda associated with the just transition. So it's essentially focused on the just transition programs. And of course, as previously reported, we're going to ensure that in the manner in which we tap from that, it meets the requirements of the country. And one of the major determinations there is the principle of ensuring that whatever we do must meet both the pay scale and cost that is consistent with our socio-economic situation here in the country. Minister Chrissy, of course, will provide greater levels of detail because she's the champion who's driving this JET IP. But it's important because it's part of the totality of the efforts that we are making in ensuring that we are able to attain energy sovereignty and in the immediate ensuring that we end load shedding. The significance of this from the immediate task of ending load shedding is that parts of it will be directed towards transmission. Like I said, the transmission financing, as reported previously, transmission is important so that they were able to expand the transmission network to make it possible for us to derive benefits of our renewable endowments in areas of the Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, and Western Cape. And we know now that the capacity, transmission capacity has been exhausted in those areas, and that undermines our ability to connect renewable energy projects on stream. So this pool of money will help us to access that. And like I said, Minister Chris will unpack more on that because she's a champion who's leading a number of ministers in ensuring that the work is coordinated. But I'm raising it in the context of the totality of the work that we are doing in ending load shedding and ultimately ensuring that we are able to attain energy security. And as reported previously, the IRP 2023 is on track. The Integrated Resource Plan, what is this? Is a document that comprehensively articulates a number of things. It answers the question, what is the projected demand that is supposed to support and anchor the South African energy economy? Secondly, it's asked the question, where are we going to get these energy sources to support this demand? And thirdly, it answers the question, what is the cost associated with that? And of course, the IRP that we are working on now is the IRP 2019, and of course, this is an update on that, and we are advanced. So internally in government, at an administrative level, technical level, those conversations have happened, and now it gets to be elevated to the level of cabinet, and I'm sure that in the post-cabinet we'll be able to share with you what are the elements of the integrated resource plan, and of course the rest of the country will also get an opportunity to engage with that and provide their feedback. It's an important milestone in that now we are beginning to move with a greater degree of certainty in relation to the sources of energy that are going to help to respond to the South African energy requirement in the short term and most importantly in the long term to ensure that we are able to get an optimal mix of energy sources. And the last one on the issues around the policy issues, the transmission financing, again, far advanced in that conversation. We are confident that in the next cabinet it will be considered. Remember, the transmission financing, what it seeks to do is to find additional sources of financing outside the fiscus and the ESCOM balance sheet. We know that the ESCOM balance sheet severely constrained. The fiscal sovereign matrix is significantly compromised as a result of a multiplicity of factors, both exogenous and endogenous factors. The Minister of Finance did share with us on the occasion of the delivery of the medium-term budget policy statement what some of those constraints are. And we know that for us to be able to accelerate the rollout, the expansion, and the strengthening of transmission, we need anything upwards of 390 billion rands. Like I said, the financing facility that has been made available within the context of the JET IP will be part of the totality of the resources that are available to help us to address the requirements on the transmission, and of course we'll expand the flow of those sources to go beyond what the international partners groups are offering, to look at other sources of financing, pull this together within a particular governance dispensation and ensure that we are able to benefit in relation to how we're going to roll out transmission, and the importance of transmission in the short term is going to make it possible for us to connect and evacuate the electrons that are currently being produced by a number of successful bidders during the previous bid windows, but also new entrants, and those that are private sector driven will benefit from this exercise. So the possibility of us expanding the mix of generation is a function of the degree to which we are able to expand the transmission, and that's why transmission receives a particular focus in the work that we are doing. And then on fixing ESCOM, now I'm taking you on the performance of the grid, which is the most immediate reflection of the work that we're doing, and of course it manifests itself in relation to the intensity of load shedding. So the previous 2 weeks really were a major disappointment in that the weeks preceding those, the previous immediate past 2 weeks, is that our unplanned capacity loss factor, by that I mean the rate at which the units are failing, the efficiency, the performance of these units, the partial load losses. I mean, we're averaging less than 15,000 megawatts, and in some instances we're even sub 14,000 megawatts. We're doing exceptionally well, and that's why you saw, if you like, that green period where we didn't have load shedding for a period of 8 days. And of course, in instances where we had load shedding during that period, it was not as intense as we are experiencing it now. And I must say that part of the deterioration is that we have had a significant failure of a cluster of units in ESCOM. I mean, just to put it into context, you can see that the week that was, so if I were to compute between from the 13th to the 17th of November, the available capacity was at about 26,499 megawatts. That is still lower than what was the case, what I use as a baseline case of May. So it simply means that relative to that baseline case, we have gone down, and it's something I'll share with you, the work that we are doing to address this situation. Significantly lower than what has been the weeks before. The week before that, we're 2,000 megawatts better than what has been the performance over the past week. And what has been the major contributing factors, you can see it's largely on account of the fact that the unplanned capacity loss factor, the rate of failure of this unit have been a bit more acute, and I'll share with you what those units are and also the expected return dates of those units. I think it's important that we are able to enter into the discipline of granularity so that now I take the country in relation to what are those specific units at which power station, which units that have led to this kind of performance, and also the work that we are doing to address that, because that's what is important. I think what we are doing here is not to lament the fact that there are units failing. We do expect that units will fail from time to time, but what is important is the work that we are doing to ensure that we are able to address that going forward. And you can see also the partial load losses. The partial load losses simply means that the units, although they are on load, they are giving us, they are generating the megawatts, but the megawatts that they are generating don't approximate their design capacity. Again, going back to the metaphor of a car, we know that this car can reach maximum speeds of 120 kilometers an hour. The car is moving, we're trying to push it faster, but it only goes to 60 kilometers an hour. So it means that we're losing half of its capacity. So that's the area that requires attention. So you can see that we moved from a low of 5,900, now we're sitting at 7,385. So there are more megawatts that are locked in the inability of these units to attain, if you like, their design capacity. And of course, the other thing that has seen a significant deterioration is the outage slip. So the outage slip simply means that I make the promise to the country that yes, we are at stage 3, but we are expecting the following units to come on stream, and you find that we don't meet that timeline that we have set for ourselves. So what that means is that we either keep the intensity of load shedding at that level, or we increase the intensity, and that undermines the credibility of the message we set at about 2,303 megawatts. If you look at what has been the historic best performance, and we had seen it during the period, the winter period, we were doing exceptionally well there. We kept it at about 766 megawatts. So put it into context, it's an additional about 1,600 of additional megawatts that are trapped as a result of our inability to return these units back on stream. So there is just an indication, and this is the cluster that I'm referring to. So we lost Unit 6 at Kendal, Unit 5. We lost Medupi, Unit 6. And Medupi really is a big unit, much younger compared to all of these power stations, the units at the various power stations. And of course, the area of concern is when one of your youngest power station, youngest units are failing. I think it's something that is receiving that level of attention. Duva again on the 11th of November, 15th of November, we also lost Hendrina. We lost Duva 6 again, 14th of November. We lost Krill 2, unit number 2, 15th of November. We lost Camden the 14th of November. We lost Krill unit 3 on the 12th of November. That's the cluster that I'm talking about. And if you were to compute it, you'll see that it amounts to over 2,700 megawatts, just shy of 3 stages of load shedding. And if we had not experienced that, of course, you will not see the kind of intensity of load shedding that we are experiencing. So I think what is important is that the return of Unit 1 and 3 in Kusile, it's significant. In that the big units, as they return, when you see the kind of cluster of failures that we have seen, the intensity of load shedding is not as acute. Of course, we reached stage 3. That's the highest that we have experienced. But what Unit 1 and 3 has done is to create an additional buffer. And that's why it's important that Unit 2 must come back at Kusile, create an additional buffer. Unit 5 at Kusile coming back, create an additional buffer. So that as we see, you experience significant failures on the generation side with regards to a cluster of units going out. Of course, those are compensated by the units that have come on stream, and an average person will not see the kind of intensity of load shedding that we are seeing. And as a result of this, what it has resulted in is the continued burning of diesel, having the OCGT running on stream. And that's something that we have avoided over the past 4 or 5 weeks before the last 2 weeks. Burn very less of diesel, preserve that, and ensure that we rely on the ability of the units on their own to give us the megawatts that are required. And that's why the media statement that went out, ESCOM today, is to say we want to build that emergency reserve because we have depleted them. We had not anticipated that there will be a cluster of failure. Failure will be given in any engineering component. But I think what has been the major issue here is just the clustering of this failure. So I want to indicate that we do expect that 5 units should come back by tonight. And here I'm referring to Duva unit number 5, Majuba unit number 5 is already on load. We're expecting Letabo unit number 4 to come on stream by about midnight today. And then we're also expecting about 2 units to come back tomorrow. That's Duva unit 6 and Arnott unit 3. Of course, this messaging is a function of our ability to keep to these timelines. And of course, you can see that some of them had already delayed their return to service, but we are confident about the ability of bringing these units back on stream to ensure that we are able to address this situation. And of course, this failure to return the units online can be particularly acute, as we have seen now in Quebec. So although we have returned Quebec Unit 1, so just to give it the context, we are extending the life of Quebec. Is our only nuclear-fired power station. We want to extend it by about 20 years. We've got 2 units there that are generating about 920 or so megawatts of energy each. And then as part of the licensing requirement, we had to take these units out, but we didn't take them out simultaneously. We took unit out in December of last year. And the intention was that, the plan was that we should take it, should be out by about 170 days. So essentially approximately 6 months. So if you had to keep to that timeline, Unit 1 should have come back around June. But we only returned it last night. So essentially means that about 4 months of outage sleep. And that doesn't reflect very well on our ability to keep to our promise. And that comes at a great cost. It comes at a great cost because we are delaying, if you like, the licensing of that power station by the regulator. But it also has implications that the duration of that outage sleep simply means that the country will not benefit from those megawatts during that period. Of course, once you are to, because it delays the taking out of Unit 2 and also retaining it. It's got simply a significant cost to the South African economy. I did make the point previously that I will get that comprehensive report, because as I sit here, without necessarily understanding what were some of the attending reasons, the reasons that obtained as a result of this delay, I can't give the assurance that as we take out Unit 2, and of course there will be a planning meeting at Quebec, and of course in the next cycle we'll tell you when Unit 2 will go out. Of course, in the intervening period, I'm sure there will be communication from ESCOM. The expectation is that it must return back on service on time. But if you have to draw from the experiences of Unit 1, it really doesn't give us that degree of confidence, and that's why there's that discussion that we'll have with management. And of course, the return to service, like I said yesterday, and then we're expecting the second synchronization to happen on the 2nd and 3rd of December, and then that's when I'm sure that we will be able to take out the Unit 2 for the kind of attention that is required, so that we are able to meet the licensing requirements. So I really want to take this opportunity to just indicate on the policy issues. I think we are moving with speed, giving certainty on what will constitute the energy mix of the country, how we are going to invest that, if you like, facility that has been made available by the major economies of the world. Of course, Minister Chris will provide greater detail, because she's the one who's pulling us in that interministerial committee. She'll be able to provide details. I'm simply raising it here as part of the totality of the interventions that we are making, and also the work that we are doing on the transmission financing side, that we've made tremendous progress, and of course it will go to Cabinet, and we'll come back to you to say this is the thinking on how we want to finance this transmission. Transmission is an important part, is sitting on the critical path of us being able to onboard the renewables, addressing in the short term the issues around the load shedding. And then there's also additional generation capacity that we are expecting by the end of this month, beginning of December. I think the 3 Scatec projects, about 150 megawatts, that should come on stream. It's important just to illustrate that outside the ESCOM is a dominant player. There's also private sector projects that are coming on stream, so that we are able to illustrate that just outside the diversity of the fuel source, but also is the diversity of the players in that space. I think it's important for the South African economy that we have that appreciation, and we should be in a position to secure energy security going forward. Thank you, Tsagani. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Minister Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, for detailing the performance of generation, as well as the implementation of the Energy Action Plan and all the interventions that government is making. I will now like to open the floor for questions from members of the media, starting with members of the media that are in-house.
Morning, Minister and colleagues. Mariska Peter from the City of these units continuing to fail us despite being, despite the maintenance program. And when last was the maintenance done? Maybe just elaborate on that. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions in the room? If not, can we go to Ishmael for questions which have been shared online?
Thanks, Chairperson. We have about 3 questions from Hemlo Prius, Independent Media. Minister, have we got any data on how much embedded generation generated in the past few months? And what are the plans for curtailment so that more power can be delivered from the Northern Cape? Has the Ministry received any feedback from the UK's Climate Finance Accelerator? And lastly, any update on power imports? That's all for now, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ishmael. Are there any more questions before we get responses?
Sorry, Chair, we just received questions from Terence Creamer, Engineering News. Minister, did Cabinet consider and approve the draft IRP for public comment and its most recent meeting? If so, what happens next? Will the GET IP implementation plan be released for public comments, or will it now be simply executed? Why has renewals bid window 7 not yet been launched? And we also have questions from Loni Bloomberg. Can we please get a bit of detail of what other sources of funding are being considered by government for the transmission grid? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ishmael. I'd now like to hand over to Eric, who will be followed by the Minister. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Mariska, thank you for that question. So I think just to give you context, you're probably aware we initially had problems with acquiring the funding, right? So funding has been acquired, and we've now got the funding for the next 3 years. So funding should not be an excuse. In terms of the fleet, we sit with just above 80 units, right? And in order for you to test reliability, you must go in and do comprehensive, good major overhauls. Okay, so I think what we are doing is we still do realize that against the backdrop of getting a bit more stability, we still sit with an unreliable fleet. And I think we know exactly where the problems are. So those units that we go in and do major outages, okay, the questions we should be asking is, are they now performing reliable? So if you really look at over 3 years, we should, because generally we do about 20 major overhauls in a given year. So I think the real action is, while we do those units and we move through the year, we can expect those other units that we didn't do major overhauls to fail. And we manage that. I think, for example, some of the failures, inherently these are moving parts, okay? Some of them are electronic parts, some of them are big mechanical parts. So we've identified where the major failures are. If you take, for example, last night, we had an issue at Medupi 5. It was in a boiler tube leak. Now, from an industry norm point of view, there's an international benchmark, and we know that, due to the fact that, coal feeds into them, we can expect these units to fail, but in a given fleet, the benchmark is 1.8 units in a given year should fail. So what I think in summary want to say is that, for me, is I think we will do an analysis of, for example, in the last 12 months, what has been the performance of those units that we've done major overhauls, and are they performing according to spec? Because the standard that we've got is, once you spend, let's say, on a major overhaul on a unit, we have a specific measure to actually measure performance, which is breakdown post the repair. So in the first 60 days, when the unit returns, it should not be failing, right? So I think in response to you is that, if we go into specifics, I think we're still sitting against the backdrop of the quality of maintenance that is being done. And we are hoping to realize more stability and more reliability. And I think together with the NECOM, we have now formed a task group, which is between the Business for South Africa and the Eskom personnel. We are now specifically zooming into the reliability KPI, getting to the root cause. We've got indicators that we measure, and we are hoping to getting to the root causes, we will actually start to get more stability. I think we have communicated the issue around skills, the issues around competence, both internal and with our OEMs, and it's an issue that we are addressing aggressively. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Just to maybe emphasize the point that Eric was making, from where we are seated, I'll be particularly alarmed if the failing units are the ones that have gone through a recent major overhaul. So if you like, the repeat failures. And if you look at the trend, that's not necessarily the case. As Eric makes the point, of course, you've got that 36 months period to go through all of them, the entire cycle. So those that come on stream, I think the early indications show that they remain on load, they perform, approximate their design capacity. But it is those that you have scheduled in the future that keep on failing, and that's to be expected. But what is not to be expected is just the cluster as it happened now. And like I said, I mean, it's part of ensuring that we introduce better health in the system. It's going to take some time, but we are confident about the ability of the generation team led by Mr. Numalo and Eric here doing an exceptional amount of work. On curtailment, Eskom is still working on that, and once we have been able to they've concluded that you'll be able to receive that update. And then on embedded generation, what we have computed the last time was that generating about 4,000 or so megawatts. Of course, they still remain grid tight. That's the update that we had, the latest that we had. And then on power imports, Eskom is still working on concluding the standard offer program. And once that it is done, I'm sure we will be in a position to indicate to you what the size of the megawatts are. And then on the IRP, because it's a policy document, the expectation is that once Cabinet approves it, it will go for public participation. But to be more specific to the question, it did not serve at Cabinet. I think the expectation is that it will serve in the last Cabinet meeting, I think in a fortnight's time, and then Minister Mantashe, of course, will share with the country what the elements are, and then we will receive the kind of, if you like, input that the country and the experts and players would want to offer on what our position is. And then on the JED IP, no, that's not a policy document. That talks to how the country wants to use that facility, what are the areas of priority. Like I said, we identified transmission as one of those, we identified distribution as one of those, we identified interventions in the Mpumalanga area as one of those. So really it's not a policy document. So the expectation is that it doesn't go out for public comment. It's really about how government sees the best way of engaging with that instrument, the financing facility, and the priority areas of deployment. Like I said, Minister Chris will provide that additional detail. And of course, on bid window number 7, yes, we want to go out. One of the key issues there is to make sure that as we go out, we are not going to be location agnostic this time. We are going to be specific around where this location should be of these new projects, because we want to ensure that there's some degree of alignment between the projects and also the issues on the availability of transmission capacity. We know that in the previous bid window number 6, there's about 2,000 megawatts that remained unallocated as a result of capacity constraints on the grid side. So we don't want this to suffer, if you like, the same blow as a bid window number 6, because really it undermines the pace at which we want to roll out and incorporate the renewables on stream. So it's important that we are able to match projects to grid capacity so that we are able to accelerate the progression of those projects and they are able to reach a financial close as speedily as possible. And then on the issues of transmission financing, so I did make the point that the offer by the International Partners Group really relates to the just transition, and you can imagine that the scope of that financing facility simply focuses on what helps the country to go clean. And of course, the country's needs are beyond just what is considered clean in the traditional sense. I think gas will be part of that conversation. So it's important that we broaden the flow of these financing opportunities. We know, for an example, concretely, that institutions like the New Development Bank, the NDP, have made available a facility of about $3 billion to help on the transmission side. And then there's also private sector-driven initiatives where private sector players were successful bidders in previous bid windows, and because of the capacity constraint, they've built in their model the ability to raise money with the financing institutions to provide for grid expansion, to allow for the evacuation of the electrons that they are producing. So the flow of financing will also include that kind of configuration. So what is the point I'm making is that the flow is much, much bigger than what the IPG is offering, what the NDP is offering. And that's why once we conclude this approach on how we want to finance transmission, you will see that there's an insatiable appetite. When we went when we hosted the transmission financing seminar, there were a significant amount of, if you like, pledges from the floor, from various financing institutions to say, we are ready to participate, create a framework, create a dispensation. Let's have sight of that governance framework that is going to inform how we're going to tap into this private sector liquidity. And that paper, or if you like, the cabinet report, seeks to respond to those questions. And once they get to be responded to, then we will have an appreciation of, if you like, the size of the investment that is available from private sector, and of course that will be made known to yourself, so that there's a better appreciation of the flow of financing options that are available to us. But I think from where we are seated, I know from where we are seated that the flow is significantly bigger than what is already on the table, and we really want to expand this. I mean, once you do that, it means that we're able to negotiate better, we're able to get significant trade-offs in relation to the cost of that financing. It just broadens the options that are available to us. And of course, what will underpin that is a sovereign interest. At all material times, we protect the interest of the country. And really, that's the kind of conversation we're having. So there's no fixed number, but all I know is that it's significantly it's a significant amount that is available, and of course it can even surpass what we have computed to be the amount of financing that is required for us to be able to strengthen and expand the transmission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister and Eric, for all the responses and the clarity. Do we have any follow-up questions as we take the last round of questions? Anything on your side, Ishmael?
Nothing, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This should bring us to the end of this week's media briefing. Thank you very much for joining and the attendance. We will convene again in a fortnight's time. Thank you once again.
Okay.